Welcome to part 2 of the third extra lecture for problems of philosophy. So Rawls recognizes these criticisms that our identity markers, so our abilities and what we desire, are valuable to what we see as a good life. And we should be able to use them to improve both our individual lots in life and the opportunities for the rest of society. So if you're good at business or sports or writing, your output should be rewarded in such a way that it benefits both you and the least well-off in society. So I have in parentheses there, max-min. So this means you maximize the minimum role in society. So if you think about the least well-off person in any given state or country, you want to maximize that person's access to social goods and opportunities. That's the rational thing to do if you don't know where you're going to end up. That's the fairest thing. But the society might be more productive. So say you have a doctor who has to train for a long time, but they come up with a cure for an illness. It is better for the person who is least well off in society to have that doctor there because they're going to create that cure. So some inequality is tolerated if those rewards for the people who study and work hard and use their skills and abilities to benefit everybody. So the first principle to remember as equality in the assignment of basic rights and duties, that guarantees that everyone in the society has rights under the system of government. And the second ensures as much individual choice as possible. The first promotes human rights and dignity, while the second promotes general welfare. But the general welfare is a special kind. It kind of eliminates some of the problems of utilitarianism. You can't just accumulate wealth because that one person is very happy to accumulate wealth. No one person or group of people can gain this kind of economic or social benefit unless it benefits the least well-off in society. So if you're stripped of identifying markers, they can be lucky accidents. So you're born into the dominant socioeconomic class of wherever you are. You're rich, you're on top of the social structure, you have power. That's an accident. You can't choose to be born into that part of society. Or genetics. You can't choose what your characteristics are going to be. You're either smarter or less smart, stronger or weaker, faster or slower. That's also an accident. So if you take all of those accidental things away, everyone is equal morally. I'm not saying everyone is equal because everybody has those sort of markers from society, from genetics, but morally, everyone is equal. Everybody deserves the same amount of moral respect. So you don't have entitlement to more or less even because of these accidents. This is a key point. Okay. In the original position, every group of rational actors would choose one. Each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive scheme of basic liberties, compatible with a similar scheme of liberties for others. And 2, social and economic inequalities are to be arranged so that they are both A, reasonably expected to be to everyone's advantage, and B, attached to positions and offices open to all. So that's on page 633. So everyone is to have an equal right to the most freedom that they can. And the liberties that he's referring to here are political liberty. So everybody has the right to vote. Everybody has the right to public office. Everybody has freedom of speech, the right to assemble, etc. Another basic liberty is freedom of the person. So you own your own body, you own its movements, how you treat it, and you should be free of violence and oppression. Another basic liberty is freedom of thought. So everybody gets access to education, equal kinds of education, and you're free to hold your own beliefs. Some later commentators, and I think including Rawls himself, added things like healthcare or the right to a home as part of freedom of the person, but that wasn't in the original text as far as I'm aware. Inequality can only be tolerated, however, when it helps everybody. So if someone's skills at business include the invention and distribution of products that maximize everyone's utility, their skills benefit everyone and they should be rewarded. So you can think of the old adage, a rising tide raises all boats. So the first principle is prior to the second, which means that any advantage that a single person or group of person adds to society can never violate these individual human liberties. The first one's more important and sacrosanct and foundational than the second one. So that's all for on Rawls for now. We'll come back to him when we compare these two pieces. So the Republic starts on page 650. This is also a short selection from a much longer work, and it's also titled the same. So an excerpt that we have, Plato first builds a hypothetical state from scratch. What does it take to build up a state in human terms? And then he argues about how it should be managed in order to make it just. Now his conclusions end up being very different to Rawls. A well-ordered society for Plato is one in which everyone in the society functions in the role that they're individually best suited to. Some are suited to lead or rule over others, while others are suited to labor. Different kinds of labor. It could be intellectual or physical labor. Still others are suited to the enforcement of the rules, laws, and norms of society. So some people are best suited just by who they are to be the leaders. Some are suited to do labor, and others are suited to enforcing rules and laws, so police, soldiers. Now, this is fundamentally anti-democratic. Individual liberty is not a part of this kind of government. So the role of government in this scheme is to ensure that, one, every individual is just as they can be, as just as they can be in their own individual lives. And then once everybody's acting justly in their own individual lives, they'll work together to form a just society. So where this is all headed is that Plato concludes that philosopher kings are best suited to rule states. So you can either just be a philosopher or royalty that has been taught in a philosophical manner. So in making this argument that these are the best people to rule, he uses several very extended metaphors. Now, some of these are very, very famous, and they are incredibly influential. If you remember them after this class, you'll see references to them even today in pop culture, in the news, in fiction, in academic works. It's kind of everywhere. And first, we'll take on the first part of the selection, which is building a state. So if you're starting from scratch and you want to build up a new nation, what do? You need roles. You need roles that provide the goods and services that people need to survive. So every state needs farmers, every state needs builders, every state needs clothes makers, because these meet our basic needs. Plato then goes on to argue, through Socrates as always, that people should focus on one job alone instead of working to meet all of their own needs. So there are two ways to organize your own personal life. Focusing on one job, where you're just a farmer, you're just a builder, you're just a clothes maker. And if you do this, Plato says, you can excel at it. You'll understand the nuances of how best to be a farmer or a builder or a clothes maker. If everyone instead focused on subsistence, so you did everything you needed to meet all of your own needs. So think of subsistence farming. So you and your family would do all the cooking and the making clothes and the building yourself. Plato argues that will be of lower quality and maybe some needs won't be met at all. You don't really necessarily have time to become an expert at all things. So this kind of specialization is only available to people who band together into a community or a state. If you're all by yourself under no state jurisdiction, you'll have to be a subsistence kind of person. But these three things aren't the only kinds of roles that you'll need in any sort of state. He adds to the list: carpenters, smiths, craftsmen, traders, shopkeepers, currency managers, and general laborers. So this is a simple life, Plato argues, but it would meet all human needs and allow for contentment. So this is the simple state. And then you might ask, where does justice enter into this simple state? And the answer for Plato and Socrates has to be in the relations or relationships between individuals, how they interact with one another. And if we stayed in this simple state, without an eye for wealth, for luxury, for power, Plato really believed that the relations between people would be just. But Glaucon, who's one of the interlocutors or discussion partners of Socrates here, says that this kind of life is very animal-like and it would never suffice for human beings. We want more. That's just part of our makeup or our nature. So Socrates adds in doctors, furniture makers, artists, hunters, cooks, maids, attendants, really any role whatsoever that goes above and beyond the minimum of survival. He calls this the luxurious state, and it might be an inevitability given the kinds of creatures we are. Any state that has all this stuff, this extra stuff, has wealth. So that means it needs protection from other states. It needs a body of people to fight for it against outside threats, so attack from other states. And it needs to monitor its own society. It needs to keep order. It needs to enforce rules. So this is the class of soldiers, who Socrates names guardians. And he thinks that they need to have a very specific kind of character. They need to be quick, both quick-witted and quick in body, strong, courageous, and spirited. So spirited means high energy, willing to go and seize the day or seize life. These are traits that make a good soldier. He notes that people who have all these traits often have a spirited temper that's hard to control. They get angry, fly off the handle. So now we have two classes of people. We have these spirited soldiers, and we have the laborers that meet our needs and our desires. But Socrates and Plato don't think that this will be a very just society. We need rulers. We need somebody to counterbalance the spiritedness of the soldiers and keep them in check, not to mention rulers to guide the interactions between people and ensure that they are just. So in order to do this, rulers need to understand how laborers work and what they need. They need to understand guardians, how they work and what they need. In order to ensure that the relationships and relations between all these people work well and in a just way, they need wisdom. They need knowledge. They need access to the truth. So who has wisdom? Who's an expert at getting wisdom? Philosophers. Before we get into all the metaphors, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Platonic soul. So he thinks that the soul is ordered into three parts, and so any state or society should be as well. The three classes of people we've talked about, the laborers, the soldiers, and the leaders, that corresponds with the parts of every single human soul. Everybody has all three parts inside of them. And this is what animates their beliefs, their lives, their actions. So the appetite is the part of you that controls your bodily needs, your sexual desire, your hunger, your thirst. The spirit is the part of you that wants glory or power or good social relations. You're spirited, just like the soldiers we talk about. The mind is the rational part of you. We've talked about that a lot. And it should often be in control of the other two. It needs to be balanced in everyone. But if the mind is in control of the other two, the most, then you are going to count as somebody who might be fit to rule. So the laborers, they have a stronger appetite in their soul that drives their character. The guardians have a stronger spirit, and the philosophers have the most balanced soul guided by wisdom. That's what I was trying to get at just a minute ago. So the just city would also be balanced between these three drives or motivations, as is the just individual. So this pursuit of wisdom that philosophers do allows their rational minds to make the best decisions, to see all of the interplay between everybody and make the best, most just choice. That makes them the best leaders. So I'm going to end part 2 here. I will see you in part 3.